Live the movie. The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers on PlayStation 2. Rated T for Teen.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, got another set of games to throw it back to. This time, it's Lord of the Rings. If there's one set of games that really defined my childhood as well, it's so funny how we've gone back to back to back with these sets of games. But the Lord of the Rings games, I adored. And it's so funny because what I would consider the great trifecta of my childhood was literally TMNT, DBZ games, as well as Lord of the Rings games. These were the ones outside of Mega Man that I just replayed endlessly. And it's funny how we've gone back to back to back with them, all with them synchronizing with big moments in pop culture, right? Dragon Ball Super Superhero, then the TMNT Cowabunga collection. We're talking about Rings of Power today, which I don't know for many people if it's a cause to celebrate, but I know a lot more people are going to be thinking about Lord of the Rings. And at the very worst, we're going to be throwing it back to an era that I think was a good time to be a Lord of the Rings fan. We'll see how the Amazon series turns out. Perhaps those comments age horribly and it turns out amazing, or it just turns out to be catastrophic and I'm a fool for giving it a shake. But anyway, what I want to do is throw it back from every Lord of the Rings game starting in 2001 all the way up until 2014. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you're new here and you're into nostalgia or retro content, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. With that, let's dive back into the past with our first game, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Now, the Lord of the Rings video games were on quite a bit of a roller coaster when it came to who was getting the IP. As you'll see here on the bottom, it went to Black Label Games, Vivendi Universal Games. And I don't know what else you'd associate them with, but it wasn't until later when EA got the license and they actually did some really good stuff with them that it took off. But anyway, the back says, join the quest to destroy the One Ring. The Dark Lord has arisen. A fellowship is formed. Now the future of Middle-earth lies in your hands. Play as Frodo, Gandalf, and Aragorn. Is it Aragorn or Aragon? I watched like 1,000,001 videos before I started this, and I know I say I love these games and I love the movies, but I've heard it pronounced both ways. I was watching clips in the movies. They said Aragorn, Aragorn. I'm just going to go with Aragorn because that's what I said when I was a kid, but I just want to warn everyone in the comments before they pop off on me. I don't know anymore because I've heard it both ways in the movies, in videos of people talking about the movies. So I'm going to go with Aragorn. Anyway, continuing on. And Aragorn, as you overcome perilous obstacles and battle the forces of evil. In your journey from the Shire to the River Anduin, you will explore beautifully detailed environments and meet many characters brought to life as described in the book. Prepare to play the greatest story ever written from the beginning. So this was more heavily based off the books, and I like that because the start of this game is really cool where you're in the Shire and even the house you're in is explorable. I love that they even went to that length. It felt like an amazing recreation. Admittedly, I've only seen the movies. I haven't read the books, which I know will make a couple of people cringe. What a casual, but we'll talk about that in a moment. It also says fight through hordes of enemies as Aragorn, then cast a lethal arsenal of magic as Gandalf, and use stealth, cunning, and the One Ring as Frodo. This game sort of had Fable vibes when you took a look at it visually. This copy came with the collectible card, as you'll see here. Got a bit of a phony eBay listing here. This is not the original case. This is a newer PlayStation 2 case, yet this game came out in, as you'll see down here, 2002. Sorry, I said 2001 in the beginning. So that was a lie. But anyway, the manual here, pretty nice. It's colorful. It's the only one in the whole bunch that we have here that is colorful. So soak it in while it's here. What I like about this game is, as you'll see, they define all the player characters, Frodo, Aragorn, and Gandalf. And they go over what you can do in the game. But one of the standout mechanics here to me is towards the back, when they get through all the combat sections and what spells Gandalf can use, is the One Ring. And as you use the One Ring, you'll have a purity meter that'll go up and down effectively. And they define it here as a status bar that tracks the effects of the ring on Frodo. This bar shows how strongly his spirit remains untainted by the ring's dark pull. Each time the ring is worn, Frodo is corrupted by it. Merely placing the ring on his finger reduces Frodo's purity, and after a short time, it begins to corrupt Frodo steadily. At full corruption, Frodo falls fully under the influence of the ring, and the game ends as Sauron's minions capture the ring bearer. Good deeds, or simply being in the company of certain individuals, may increase Frodo's purity level. So there was kind of like a morality meter in this game with Frodo, which made him more interesting to play as, even though his gameplay wasn't... Wow, look at that throwback. The Scorpion King with the rock. Wow, what a throwback that is. But yeah, his gameplay was interesting because it was more morality-based, good deed-based, and some people would have found that boring, but I kind of thought it was pretty cool. Even though the combat wasn't anything to freak out about, I thought this game was nice in the terms of exploration and bringing the book to life. But then the movies really took over, and that's where we move on to this dirty case here of The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. Now, the reason I wanted to use this case for this video is, does anyone remember CEX? I don't know if they're around anymore, but for me personally, I used to have one nearby, and I got this game for $1.50, and they used to sell games for dirt cheap. I remember I got Naruto Uzumaki Chronicles for $1, and it had the manual, it had the collectible trading card with it, the disc was in perfect condition. It was so great to collect games back then when everything wasn't costing an arm and a leg. But I digress. This was the game that I played the most growing up. I love the Lord of the Rings: The Two Tower games. It was atmospheric, it was creepy, it was downright difficult because I did not know how to parry. I love the progression system. This was what I would define as my Devil May Cry. It had some elements of DMC pulled into it, although I had never really even played the original DMC games, so that's something we'll have to do on this channel. Trust me, I want to get around to them. But this was really my DMC, just high action, style, trying to get the highest points per combat scenario. I know it's a weird comparison, but that's how I would define it. The back says, decide the fate of Middle-earth. Join the Fellowship, play as Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli in this epic adventure. Upgrade your characters with new moves and weapons. Unlock a secret character and level. Ooh, I wonder. Defeat the Dark Lord's minions. Battle through locations from the first two films, including the defense of Helm's Deep. Iconic moment, of course. Fight orcs, the Uruk-hai, ring race, and more. And exclusive movie content. Scenes from the film of The Two Towers, where, yes, this was one of the games that did use, the movie for the cutscenes, something that was kind of acceptable back then, but they had to get rid of it over time in exchange for CG cutscenes. It's something I talked about with the Ninja Turtles, where they did have a couple of CG cutscenes, like for example in Mutant Nightmare, but it took a while for them to get there, where the original TMNT 2003 game used scenes from the cartoon. Soundtrack from the Fellowship of the Ring, and exclusive interviews with stars of the films. This is why I think tie-in movies worked, because you get a real true extension of the film in the terms of the actors and like exclusive content involving them. Like I said though, the first manual we went through was the only colorful one, so this one spends a lot of time breaking down what the One Ring is, the story behind it. I imagine most of you who have seen anything with the Lord of the Rings will be familiar with this, but of course they go all in on the lore with Middle-earth, what that is, what the Fellowship is, and then you're getting started with the game itself, which again is much appreciated if you're diving in for the first time. For me, that was a great read in the car driving home with this game, just going like, okay, let's see who these characters are. But I find the lack of pictures rather disturbing here. Just Frodo, Gandalf, Gimli, Legolas, Aragorn, but no pictures to show who they are. But I digress. Let's talk about the game itself. So, Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers is an excellent action game that I don't know if time has been quite favorable to it, but I still love it because of the nostalgia it brings me. Like I said, I think this game is very creepy, like the Mines of Moria. I love the music that plays. It's very foreboding. The use of mist as you're like crawling through the swamp and your movement slows down a little bit as you're traveling with Gimli. I just love the feel of this game. And as a kid, it used to freak me out. Now, the camera is probably why this game hasn't aged favorably, because you will fight with it a lot. It's in a lot of fixed positions, and sometimes you'll have to take out like your bow and arrow, or if you're Gimli, throw your axe, and you'll have to shoot enemies off screen that are going to harass you. There's also the combat scenarios where you'll have 1,000,001 orcs running at you while you're getting shot at with projectiles, and you just have to stand there and mash the square button and do this wacky looking parry animation. It's hilarious now, but it was definitely unrefined. Now, here's where the bit of Maddie closed-mindedness, or as I like to call it, just the poor status, started to play a factor, because I replayed Two Towers a lot because I didn't have many other Lord of the Rings games when it came to the movie tie-ins, so I never got to experience, unless I went over to a friend's house, Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. Now, what I read about online is like, this is the movie game. So I dove into this for the first time. Of course, I've seen the movie a dozen times, but I dove into this for the first time, and y'all are right. Yeah, this... if I played this when I was a kid, it was a complete upgrade in every way, shape, or form compared to the Two Towers. So let's get into it. Live the movie, be the hero with my man Legolas front and center, my favorite character. Love my guy. Live the epic adventure, Play as 9 characters, form your fellowship by teaming up with a friend online, or fight side by side in multiplayer co-op, defeat the forces of evil, confront Shelob, the King of the Dead, the Witch King, Sauron's Lieutenant, and more, and movie exclusives, the only game with scenes and music from the film. Again, I've mentioned this in the past, like I think we talked about it with Batman games and stuff, with Batman Begins. This was a selling point, like saying, we're the only ones who can use the scenes from the movies. So when they sold them alongside this and DVDs weren't available, this was your only way to re-experience the movies again without having to go out and buy a ticket. So some people saw value in that, believe it or not. Anyway, we got what feels like a chunky manual, but it's a bit of a misleading thing because here on the back you have the EA cheat codes and game hints if you register to their account online. I just thought that was a cool little throwback. You see a Medal of Honor Rising Sun promotion on the back, one of my favorite first-person shooters ever. I love Rising Sun because that game is the campaign that has the baseball stadium as one of the levels. I just thought that was so cool. Anyway, let's continue on with the game we're really talking about, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. So, it's more of what you saw in the manual of Two Towers. What I really liked about this one, though, is somewhere buried in here, because I read all the manuals before I dive deep into the actual game itself. Let's see here. It's talking about online play, which is important because you could, again, match up with friends online. That was a big selling point for the game. I had no idea what online play was until the Xbox 360. Now they're listening to feedback. All the characters have their little in-game portraits, even if they're really chopped up JPEGs, low resolution, that's okay. They, again, heard my feedback here in the future. Maybe it's not in this game. I was thinking of the evil mode, but you know what? That's Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. I apologize. So anyway, that's the manual you'd get with Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. So I talked about in the second game, Two Towers, how you would have upgrades. This game also has it, and it carries it another 9 yards. So it's a very action-heavy game. You're going to be cleaving and clawing through dozens and dozens of orcs, and as you do so, you're going to get a rating. Now, the rating isn't the style of your combo. It's rather how quickly you kill the orcs, so it's very speed-dependent, and that'll lead to some rinsing and repeating of certain combos, but eventually, you'll have a bar building up, and as that bar builds up, you'll go from fair to good. I think it's excellent and then perfect. And once you're maxed out for a while and this bar fills up, then every kill you get is perfect. Now, why do these ratings matter? It's because these will give you points, and the amount of points you get depending on the rating you have per kill is what truly matters. So when you get a lot of points, you can go to the upgrade station and you go there, unlock a lot of moves. You can unlock moves for everyone in the game, or you can unlock moves for respective characters. And those moves continue on throughout the game. As you progress in the story, you'll have more and more moves you can unlock, and you're not going to unlock all of them by the time the game is done, which gave it a sense of replayability. So for me, that Lord of the Rings Two Towers game is why I stuck with it for so long. I kept rinsing and repeating, getting better at the game. Everyone had their own respective levels, their own movesets, but I gotta be real with y'all that Return of the King takes it 9 miles further, and it is really impressive. I love it, and it's also a beautiful game, especially for its time. A beautiful looking game. It's one of the better movie tie-ins there. Combine that with Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and we were eating pretty good at that time for movie tie-in video games, but that is where some of the movie tie-ins end, and we start to get into more individual properties, right? So, my friends, you bow to no one, but you bow to these video games, do you not? Because let's talk about Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, the most Matty Lord of the Rings game ever that I never played. I feel ashamed to admit it, but this is one we definitely got to get a so I played for the first time rolling, because this game screams Matty. So yes, a rare GameCube game because GameCube games are completely overpriced, but as you'll see here, Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, the most exciting RPG since Final Fantasy, according to Electronic Gaming's Monthly. On the back, it says one RPG to rule them all. And also a side note, you may be wondering what these stickers are here. These aren't from, say, the storefronts. It means that it's an official Lord of the Rings product. And you'll see it kind of has a little bit of a shine to it. But you'll see it on a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about here. Like you noticed it as well on Return of the King. So a lot of Lord of the Rings products had that sticker on it. I know this may sound contrary to what I typically do when I collect games, but I actually look for these stickers. It's almost like a stamp of authenticity when you buy memorabilia from a sports game or something. Anyway, the back says one RPG to rule them all, battle alongside members of the Fellowship, and an adventure spanning all 3 films in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Journey through Middle-earth with 6 new playable characters from the movies. Customize your heroes with an in-depth skill tree and over 500,000 weapon, item, and armor customization. all new turn-based combat system gives you a new level of strategic control over the combat encounters. Adventure with friends in cooperative multiplayer modes. Stunning special effects and voiceover from the original actors bring the cinematic feel of the films to life, and wreak havoc as Balrog, a minion of Sauron, or other enemies in the expansive minigame. That's the evil mode I was talking about. So you crack it open. This is a 2-disc game, as were many GameCube games. Here you'll have a couple of little ads in the back for the adventure card game. You go to LordOfTheRingsAdventure.com and you could pop this out. Fortunately, I did not. So this is actually pretty cool. It's a Verizon Wireless promotion back here. Talk about a real trip to the past. But what you're here for, of course, is the manual. And again, the manual, it's not really popping. And for an RPG, I was surprised how thin it was. It doesn't really go into much. It goes over all the brand new characters you're going to see in the game. And this is what I was looking for and fishing for when it came to the Lord of the Rings Return of the King manuals. Here, evil mode. It says in evil mode, you control Sauron's forces. When you have defeated the forces of light in all battles in a chapter, you earn special evil weapons and items. These are placed in your inventory in your single-player character's game. To play in evil mode, select more in the main menu and select evil mode. Each time a chapter is successfully completed in the single-player game, it is unlocked for play in evil mode. So it's kind of a cool little mini game that I thought was neat existed, a product of its time. You know, nowadays we don't even get cool mini games that you just unlock over time. Like, I think of fighting games and how just much of a tragedy they are that we just don't get unlockables. It stinks. Everything's sold to us if it can be unlocked. Anyway, let's talk about Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. As I mentioned, I have not beat this game. This was my first time playing this as well. I am mad at myself, though. Remember how I've spoken about Mega Man X Command Mission in the past? Mega Man X Command Mission is my favorite game of all time that I never beat. I don't know how else to describe it. But this was a game that also, because of my lack of funds, I was not able to get my hands on until much later in my lifetime. And so it's one of those games that, as much as I love, like, do I want to see it end? Like, almost not knowing what happens is the carrot at the end of the stick that keeps me going. Like, do I want to spoil that for myself? Of course, one day I actually will. But right now, it's one of those fascinating mysteries, despite me loving that game so much. But the reason I loved Mega Man X Command Mission growing up is because it almost made the characters that you know and love, Mega Man Zero, Axel, feel like premium characters, not just in the terms of writing and acting and story moments, but actually seeing them. Of course, Mega Man's there the whole game, but Zero and Axel are gone for a while. Zero disappears in the beginning of the game. You don't get Axel in your party until much later in the game. So characters like Spider, Massimo, these were big focal points, and it made me fall in love with the universe more because it made those characters I knew so closely exciting when they actually appeared. So the same thing could be applied here, as this is a story spanning across all three films. So when you see Aragorn, when you see Legolas, when you see Gandalf, it's that oh moment, like you're pointing at the screen that, yo, that's him, got him, all right, this is hype. So it makes them feel more important, and the way they organically mesh that all together is awesome. But if you want a quick elevator pitch as to what this game is, I would define it as Final Fantasy X meets Lord of the Rings. It has the same exact UI, skill sets, all of that stuff. And is there a problem with that? No. Much to people's dismay, I wasn't in love with Final Fantasy X, but it's a good game, and it's certainly one at the time you should have borrowed from, which this game shamelessly did. And that's fine. So Lord of the Rings Third Age is literally Final Fantasy X, but Lord of the Rings, I want to play more of it. It is excellent so far. I'm really digging it. I'm into a number of JRPGs right now, so I'm going to dial it back until probably the holiday time where I have some time to really dig into these types of games. But I was really excited going through it. There is a great skill tree. There's customization. You'll find weapons and armor and chests. I was kind of surprised, given it's a 3D game with a higher production value, that there's random encounters. I don't think random encounters in video games are bad, but I was surprised that they were here given the production value of the game. Anyway, I want to tell you a second part of this story, which is Lord of the Rings: The Third Age for Game Boy Advance. Again, with that sticker here on the top left. Box isn't in fantastic condition, but I don't have such a strong attachment to this game that I needed like the perfect box. Now, when you see gameplay for this game, I'm going to be using my modded Game Boy Advance. So if you notice why the screen looks really nice and it's absolutely beautiful, I just did that over this past weekend because I'm waiting for my analog pocket, but I still want to have like a backup option and one that I can mess around with. Plus, it's a fun little home project. So if you're wondering why the gameplay looks really good for that, I just want to make sure that was clear. Anyway, the back of the box for this one says strategy role-playing games come to Middle-earth. Recreate the battles from all of the movies in this brand new turn-based strategy game. Fight for good or evil in the war for Middle-earth. Unleash your best strategies with a new tactical combat system and challenge a friend in a multiplayer battle. Now you can see in the gameplay when combat begins, what's the parallel here? Fire Emblem. Literally what Lord of the Rings, the Third Age on Game Boy Advance is Fire Emblem. It is so awesome. Now let's crack this open. It's rare we get to crack open a Game Boy Advance game here on Retro Rebound, but we will be soon when my analog pocket does arrive. We have a manual here. This one, at least a little bit thicker for a RPG. It goes into choosing your companion, what mission you're going to do, what side you're going to be on. I love Game Boy Advance manuals, man. This is my favorite system of all time, so I just love holding one of these things. They go through multiplayer upgrades that you'll go through in every mission. Once you finish it, there is a wireless mode thanks to the advances in technology during that time. And then the back here is all health warnings and, of course, a manual in a separate language. We also have here, hold on, it's in a plastic case. Hold on, where is it? It's fighting with me here. Hold on now. There we go. And we have the cartridge. I love that when I bought this game, it came in the plastic that it arrived in, because I remember that was a big deal. It was a big deal back then that this stuff was protected. So now let's talk about Lord of the Rings: The Third Age for Game Boy Advance. This game was awesome, okay, because it really just supports the argument I've been making for a long while now, which is that these tie-in games were great when they double dipped, because we didn't have things like the Switch, we didn't have things like the Steam Deck where you'd effectively get the same experience on the go. Nope, not this time around. You had to be innovative. And so they couldn't take the actual vision that they had for Lord of the Rings: The Third Age and squeeze it down into the Game Boy Advance. So they got creative and they said, well, what if we decided to make our own Fire Emblem game? And that's what they did. It is awesome. I really dug my time with this game. I love the art style. I love the music that plays, because of course with the Game Boy Advance you got to compress every file known to man, especially the audio. So it's like very crunchy Lord of the Rings music. A product of its time, no doubt, but one that I enjoyed quite a bit. Continuing on with a little more strategy-based Lord of the Rings, we have Lord of the Rings Tactics for the PlayStation Portable. Another rarity here. It's hardly any time we talk about a PSP game on this channel. Claim the ring for good or evil. And that was something they were pushing, because also in Lord of the Rings: The Third Age on Game Boy Advance, you could play as the villains, which is really cool, because a lot of games nowadays are always saying, be the hero, be the good guy, and Lord of the Rings encouraged both sides, and that occurred for many games, as we'll get into. Play as Gandalf, Sauron, or any of the 10 other heroes and villains from the trilogy as you decide the fate of Middle-earth, because at this point the movie's done, so they're just exploring everything they possibly can. Build a massive army. Equip your soldiers or minions with hundreds of items, upgrades, and skills. Enemies become allies. Good and evil fight on the same side for the first time in an exclusive Wi-Fi multiplayer mode, which is unfortunate because I couldn't access it, since who the heck has this game? Seize the high ground. Take turns simultaneously against up to 3 friends on famous Middle-earth battlefields in this turn-based RPG. All right, taking a look at the manual here, the sadness continues as we see. It's black and white again. They all got the same thing going on in the top here with the font and the ring. It's like, okay, we got it. We got it. Think of something else now. Again, for an RPG, kind of disappointing how thin this manual is. It goes over the different icons you will see on the battlefield and what they actually represent. They go through combat phase and how each turn goes, and it's over. It is a thin manual, man. Very, very sad. But Lord of the Rings Tactics was a game that I did like growing up. I think firing it up, I realized I enjoyed it because it was one of those experiences I could take when I went to like baseball tournaments, for example, and I would watch my brother play and I'd have nothing to do. So I'd have Lord of the Rings with me. So this game was clutch in that regard. But I also really loved how the battlefield always had the camera rotating. Nowadays, I think it works against the game because I just want to see who I'm going to be attacking and how I want to navigate the battlefield. But the game is always turning the camera. So I remember as a kid, I'd just sit there and just wait. Okay, now I can see the battlefield. Okay, cool. I'm going to move Aragorn over here. Okay, no, wait. I don't know. I wasn't a smart kid, clearly, but I digress. Lord of the Rings Tactics is a cool turn-based game. I don't like nowadays how the turns actually function, where everyone moves at once. So you'll try to make this big galaxy brain play, but the enemy will move at the same time. So it's like, I'll move Frodo here, Sam here, Aragorn here, and you'll commit to your move, and the enemy moves at the same time, but they don't tell you where the enemy's going to move. So you sit there and think, well, okay, someone's going to get hurt somewhere, and I don't know who it's going to be. So the game does work against you a bit. It's a turn-based game. You don't want to do that. So it doesn't age favorably, but I still love the game deep down. Okay, it's 2006, and we got an Xbox 360 game now. Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 2. There was a first game on PC. I've never played it, don't know a thing about it, but this one I was excited to get in my collection about a year and a half ago, and I dove into it for the first time here because RTS and strategy wasn't really my thing, but it's cool as hell that this actually made its way to the 360. Barely at that. We'll get into why. All of Middle-earth at your command, devastating power at your control, an easy-to-use interface allows you to completely control the massive armies of Middle-earth. The glory of Middle-earth in HD. Relive the legendary battles from the books and films in breathtaking cinematic detail that takes full advantage of the 360's HD capabilities. You always love to see the HD call out there, a real sign of the times. And the war rages online. Combat friends and conquer Middle-earth with 4 exclusive multiplayer options. Again, EA still in the mix here. EA did a good job with Lord of the Rings. Say what you will about them nowadays, they did a good job with Lord of the Rings. Okay. Cracking it open, we have a nice clean manual here, silky smooth, and no art. Oh, the pain. Nothing worse than a colorless, just font-filled manual. But it's an RTS, so it goes through summoning heroes, it goes through upgrading your units, naval combat, powers when you use the Book of Powers, and it's over. I mean, man, come on, EA, you were better than that. I know you were. Okay. Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth 2. Remember when I said that they used the capabilities of the 360 and I went barely? That's because of the frame rate. This game runs terribly nowadays. It is constantly dropping frames. This was clearly built with PC in mind and then squeezed down for the 360, and it does not run well. It reminded me, though, when I fired this game up, of when I was younger, my uncle had got me a Tom Clancy RTS game. Someone can remind me what it is. I want to say, not Hawks, End War, I want to say it was. And I remember playing that for the first time, and that was my real, true first experience with a RTS. And I really didn't jive with it. But now, as I've gotten deeper into gaming and I've experienced that genre a lot more, I have to say I believe Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 2 would have been my jam, right? It's associated with something I dig, which was a big part of my childhood. Clearly, a lot of my favorite games growing up were movie tie-ins or tied to properties I'd seen movies of. Just something I was already familiar with, and the game attached to it I loved by default, it would seem. But to have a real, true game capture the wars that you would see, there was nothing really like that, because when you played Return of the King or when you played Two Towers or even Third Age, the battles would wage on, in the background. It would sort of create the idea that a war was happening, but you'd fight a set amount of enemies. This game said, here are the armies, control them all, go crazy, let them really battle it out. And that was what made this game special, I feel. But what I think really captured the true essence of war in Lord of the Rings was one of my favorites from Pandemic, Lord of the Rings Conquest, another EA published game. Okay, the quick elevator pitch for this game: Conquest, Star Wars Battlefront, OG Star Wars Battlefront, but Lord of the Rings. If you haven't played this, we got to talk, and we'll talk about it more in a separate video. Fret not. Save Middle-earth or destroy it. Again, continue on with the good and evil dichotomy. Choose your side in the War of the Ring. Play through all the battles from the films and fight through an all-new story in the evil campaign. Play how you want. Wield a sword, shoot a bow, use stealth, or conjure magic. Take control of trolls, Oliphants, horses, catapults, heroes, and villains. The choice is yours. Epic online battles. I played this game online so much. Split screen action. 2 friends can play cooperatively or competitively in the same room. I did that too. I mean, I ran up the hour clock on this game. It was insane. Cracking it on open, we have the manual, which is really crumpled up. I'm not sure really what happened here. I'm deeply disturbed. I don't know, man. Something here is mighty wrong. I'm very uncomfortable. It's like Aragorn says, right? I would have gone with you to the end. Yes, I'm reading this off my phone right now. I was like trying to find the quote. I'm like, I wrote down an Aragorn quote that I wanted to use. I was like, where can I ham fist this one into the video? And I was like, of course, the crumpled manual would be the best time to say, I would go with you into the fires of Mordor, because I would for this game. It's that good, man. All right. So Lord of the Rings Conquest, again, Battlefront, but Lord of the Rings. It is fire. Love this game. You know, the controls aren't great, but what I loved was playing as the rogue and crawling around, all stealthy, and then you sneak up on an enemy, pull them back, and stab them. That was broken online, by the way. No one could stop me. I was the most busted rogue player to ever touch online play in Lord of the Rings Conquest. But much like Star Wars Battlefront, as you did better and better in matches, you would unlock the hero characters. So you'd be able to play as the familiar faces you saw in the movies, and they would have their own special movesets. I will say, compared to, say, something like Star Wars Battlefront 2, where I felt every hero and villain had their own personality with their moveset, there is a lot of reused animations that carry from, like, the base soldier classes all the way into the heroes and villains, and I thought that was a little bit disappointing. Also, when you see Battlefront 2 had a great set of classes, upwards of I think 6 or 7 in some factions, whereas Lord of the Rings Conquest kind of limits it down to 4, it did feel a bit tight, but it's because they had more expansive movesets. There was a light attack, a heavy attack, a smash attack. You could parry and block. There was abilities for each class, so they were much more expansive skill sets. They were a lot deeper, which is why they did less. But still, being able to live out these battles, again, just like how Battlefront let you get into boots of a true soldier in that war, I had the same feeling for Lord of the Rings, and there comes Pandemic with this beautiful idea and says, let's do it again, but for this game. I love the maps. I love the music. Of course, the music rocks. You're literally living out the battles. The story here is awesome. I somehow don't have the Platinum Trophy or all 1,000 gamer score for this, even though I've played them on both versions. This was the first game that I bought on PS3. I played it. I got a lot of trophies, put a ton of hours into it, and I rebought it on 360 and got all the achievements there, as many as I possibly could, I should say, because I think a lot of them are online trophies and achievements, unfortunately. And really just wrung it dry because this game just didn't get old to me. All right, let's move on to a pretty special game here because of the developer, and that's Lord of the Rings War in the North, a Xbox 360 game. This one came out in 2011, the year of Skyrim, so it was a bit overshadowed. If you're a fantasy game coming out in 2011, I feel bad for you. It says a new fellowship unites. Experience a new story. Create your own fellowship. Brutally realistic combat. We're gonna put a pause on that one. Anyway, opening it up here. It's this time, as you'll see, it's actually moved on to Warner Brothers games. Now they have hold of the IP. EA has let it go. And now we have the thinnest manual yet. Oh man, this hurts, but at least, I mean, it's black and white, but mostly black with some art in the background. That's good. Anyway, I said the developer made this game special. Snowblind Studios. They're the studio I associate with games like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, with Champions Return to Arms. I always say how when I grew up, I didn't have Diablo, but I had games like that. Those were my Diablos, right? And what effectively they did here was took a next-gen approach to that formula they established back on the PlayStation 2 with the Champions and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance series and carried it forward. So the game begins, you choose one of 3 classes. It does have dialogue trees, so you can pick what you want to say when you interact with certain characters you'll see in the movies. It does add a bit of replayability, but I think co-op was the defining feature for this game. I had friends who didn't like fantasy that much, unfortunately. I'm not a fantasy junkie. I prefer sci-fi, but I still love fantasy. So for me, I didn't get to play this to completion with someone online, which I think is where it's best experienced, because playing it on your own, you don't get that chemistry where these classes can really work together, and I think the game truly shines. But I love that it was a very original take on Lord of the Rings, right? It's not beating the war drum that, you know, come check out how this ties into the movies. Right now, we're so far separated from the movies that we don't really need to tie too closely in. Like, the Lord of the Rings brand is strong enough to do its own thing, and this was really, I feel, that first attempt at it. Of course, things like Conquest fed into the movies, but they were very much their own thing, but still they leaned heavily on the movies. I don't want to say that War in the North did that, but I do have a little bit of nostalgia bias. I am sad that this company, Snowblind, is now defunct. They closed down in 2012, but they made what I thought was a really cool Lord of the Rings game, and I do hold it dearly because it was one of their, I think it was their last game actually, because again, this came out in 2011 and then they were closed in 2012, but they released some absolute banger action RPGs. That was their bread and butter, and this was one of the better ones that came out of the Lord of the Rings series. All right, we got 2 left, and they're PS Vita games. Lego Lord of the Rings and Lego The Hobbit. You see on the back for Lego Lord of the Rings, it says, join the battle in the greatest adventure ever built. Explore the open world of Middle-earth. Battle fearsome creatures of myth and legend, and wield powerful weapons and magical items. Now, for The Hobbit, reclaim the Lost Kingdom brick by brick. Battle ravenous trolls. I'm sorry, you probably can't even read this because I can barely read it here, and I'm the one sitting in front of it. And dangerous orcs, as well as many more. Combine the dwarves' unique abilities to solve puzzles, often with hilarious results. And explore iconic locations in Middle-earth, from the Shire to the Goblin Town and beyond. Now, these games I bought on Vita because this is like my hub for Lego games. I just prefer them here at this point in time. But this is where the reception of Lego games started to go downhill, and I don't know why. I actually really dug these games. I like that, for example, Lord of the Rings from Lego was open world. You look at the whole stack of games we went through, and it wasn't until much later with Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor that we got a open world Lord of the Rings game. But this was the first one that did it, because Lego was really starting off with Lego Batman 2, getting into open world games. And that was what won me back over. I was starting to get a little bit of Lego fatigue in the post-Lego Star Wars era. But once they went into open world and started to provide like really fun, whimsical side quests, and then they did it for Marvel superheroes as well. I mean, I was all in. It felt like TT games just could not be stopped. But here with Lego Lord of the Rings, they did something no one else did. And so I appreciated it for that. You know, it was still silent. I think, was this one silent? I actually am not 100% sure. But again, Lego's games just have their charm. Now, Lego The Hobbit, I was a little less, inclined to enjoy this one. I like The Hobbit less in general than Lord of the Rings. I think that's a pretty common opinion. I'm not sure though. But when it came to the game itself, that also applied. This was a much more focused adventure, and it felt to me like it was out of sync compared to what was happening here with Lego Lord of the Rings. Like, it literally was 2 completely different teams working on it, and that showed. But they were pumping out great games. They're still fun. I still enjoy them a lot on Vita, and I would recommend them. That's what's interesting about this whole stack here that you're going to see right now is, let's get the Vita games in the mix. All these games here are ones that I would be comfortable recommending to you, and that's pretty rare. They all do their own thing. They're all pretty unique, and some series that are known for rinsing and repeating, that's hard to do. But fortunately, like, this movie game formula didn't overstay its welcome with Two Towers, with Return of the King, because after that you got something like The Third Age. So it just really continued to diversify what it did, and that's why I love these Lord of the Rings games. What are your favorites? Let me know down below. Another long retro rebound in the books, so I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts. Do fire away, and with that, take great care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next retro rebound. Peace out.